Make that big boss less special. It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level. Second level. Second level, baby. Second level.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming back on out. It is my pleasure to present Priscilla Snow, who's going to be talking to us about collaboration communications. It's cool.
Thank you. Okay. So a little bit about me, if you do not know me. I studied theater in college. That's what my background was in. I did sound design, a lot of other things, as you tend to do. Theater's pretty similar to game development in that you end up wearing a lot of hats a lot of the time. So that was good, like, training for the future. I worked on my first game in 2014. It was Beneath Flows, and then I worked on the Domovoy, which had already come out but did not have sound, so I kind of fixed that. Most recently, I worked on the original soundtrack for Voyager by Bruno Diaz. And currently, I am working on The Silence Under Your Bed, a horror game that's very like Goosebumps inspired. I'm also working on Southern Monsters, a game that's been in development since late 2015, as well as a game for the University of Arkansas, and a game that's very relevant to my talk today, Memory Blocks, which is a Twine anthology. It's an interactive fiction anthology that all revolves around video games, memory, and memory cards. So, and I have a very good cat named Grendel. That's a really important tidbit about me. So if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen him. He's very big and good. All right, so the first thing I want to kind of talk about is like being a first-time collaborator. My first time collaborating was like a long time ago whenever I got into theater. You start to learn a lot of skills for collaboration. But when it comes to game development, I know a lot of people want to make, their first game that's really theirs, and they don't know how to kind of assemble their team. So one of the things that I feel like is really important to consider right at the beginning is, who are you? What are your strengths, and what is it that you are really passionate about as far as being involved in the creative process? Myself, I am primarily a composer and sound designer. I know that's my strength. So I tend to make a lot of friends with people who are writers or programmers or artists, people whose strengths complement my own. And sometimes I, still have to fill kind of a void in a project where, in Memory Blocks, for instance, I'm the sound designer, the composer, but I'm also doing the artwork, and I'm also producing the game and coding and doing all these things that I have a little bit of experience in, but it's been very much like a learning process where I've been very much challenging myself. So I always start with like my strengths, like what is it that I really want to focus on in a project? And again, this goes with that, like what do you want to work on? And not only like which element of a game do you want to work on, what do you want that game to be about? What is it that you are passionate about? What story do you want to tell? With Memory Blocks, like it came about because I got a secondhand PS2 from a friend who already had a PS2, and she had gotten it from someone else who was giving it away. And we took it home and set it up, and there were these old memory cards in it. And they had save data from like 2004. Like, this was old, game saves for games I had never played before. And I like tweeted about it because I thought it was really cool. And then a bunch of people tweeted at me about it, and they were like, this is really cool. And we kind of started collaborating, and now we're like almost to the point where we have a demo we can put up on itch.io. So I found something I wanted to work on, and like other people wanted to work on, and we made it happen. Here, kind of at the very beginning, knowing what your ideal result for a project is really helpful. Knowing where you want it to be. We knew immediately that our game we wanted to put on itch.io because it's a fantastic place to put a game. Maybe the best, who knows? And we knew we wanted to, or at least I knew that I wanted to compensate the people I'm working with. I don't have like a lot of funds to compensate people right up, so I knew that we needed to start talking about how are we going to charge for this game, how much are we going to charge, how much is everyone getting, kind of figuring out all the like nitty-gritty details like right at the beginning. And then when you're wanting to approach one of these like projects, what is your role in the overall group? Like, are you the person responsible for defining roles and goals? Are you going to take the charge? Like, being able to organize a group like this is a very useful skill to have. It's definitely something that you have to grow as time goes on and like with experience. Before this game in particular, where I'm working with over 20 writers right now, I primarily worked on smaller games that were either just myself and my spouse, or us and like one of our friends who's an artist. We worked in very small groups, but starting very small like that was super important for learning, you know, the different tools that we use to communicate and keep each other updated, and just that help us throughout the development of a game. And one thing that also kind of fits with all this is finding your collaborators. You want to find people who you know can follow through, essentially. Finding people who are as serious about finishing a project as you are is like really tantamount to finishing a project, because when you build a team, you can't finish it by yourself. You can't finish it alone. You have to have that team with you. So here's this, which kind of goes back to my story earlier about like starting collaboration on Twitter. It worked that time. It doesn't always lead to collaboration, but it did then. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying a moment ago of like looking at your strengths and finding people that complement those. Like I said, I am a sound designer. My spouse happens to be a writer. So those things tend to work really well for like text-based games. So we make a pretty good team when it comes to making small games. Finding your friends, like, I feel like most people have like really talented friends, and like giving work to those friends is really cool, especially when you get to pay them. Like paying your friends for art is like the best feeling ever, because you know you're helping them, because we're all kind of in the same situation as artists. And one of the other like best ways to meet people to collaborate with is something you guys are doing, because you're at a conference. But going to conferences, joining game jams, being on Twitter and being active on Twitter is really helpful. I feel like when I kind of started becoming more active on Twitter and I'm more aware of like who is out there and what they have to offer and what they have to say, I started to become more confident in like approaching people about projects or just talking about my own projects. So those tools are really, really useful just for like meeting more people and making more connections. Because even just making a connection with someone you might not work with, they might know the next person you're going to collaborate with. So it's really great to just like keep meeting people that way. And finding people who are genuinely excited and creatively compatible is something that has also helped me tremendously. Not every collaboration I've begun has ended, but for the most part, pretty much every project I've started since 2014, I think other than one, has been completed and put out or is in development currently. Finding people who are creatively compatible is really hard, and it's hard, especially when you start to work with someone and realize it's not working. That's really tough, and it's going to happen to pretty much anyone who's in any kind of creative endeavor looking to collaborate. And it's a really delicate subject. You know, you don't want to tell someone like, hey, I don't think we can work together when you're in the middle of a project. So trusting yourself and trusting your instincts. Like, if you're in the first like meeting and the first like, first part of your planning period and all of that, if you start to feel like this isn't right or it isn't comfortable or you suddenly feel less excited, listen to that and maybe talk to the other person. Being like really open and forthcoming about that kind of thing is so much easier than ignoring it and pushing it off until the project just fails because it doesn't have any traction and it doesn't have any energy behind it. Okay, and I also want to kind of talk just about some tools that are really useful once you're in a collaboration. And some of them aren't like, some are actual tools and then some are just kind of like states of mind that you can use as a tool. The first is being flexible and compassionate with your collaborators. This is something I take really like seriously because I know the people I'm working with really well, and I know that they are all human beings. A lot of them have jobs on the side. A lot of them have a ton of other freelance projects they're doing to pay their bills. And I want to make sure that they aren't ever stressed about something they're working on with me, because they shouldn't be prioritizing that and feeling stressed about it when I know that they have like just so many other things going on. And so that's something I'm really upfront with my collaborators is, if they feel stressed out about something, I want to know about it, and I want to tell them like, hey, it's okay, take your time. You don't have to, finish this by next week or whatever. Like, we can talk about it and we can make it work. And something else that kind of helps with that and helps with that level of like empathy within your work group is being very specific and documenting your intentions from the start. So for me, with this particular project, something I did was create a document right at the beginning, like the first day we started talking about making this a real thing. And I put my intentions as a producer, I put my intentions as a collaborator, the intentions of the project, and what my goal was, and what I wanted, what I hoped they would get from it as well. And that was really good for making sure everyone is on an equal playing field and has the same understanding of like what they're undertaking by joining a project. And this, this wasn't a contract necessarily, it was just something that was very good for making sure everyone had the same expectations. And I think it's really important. Expectations are a really big part of collaboration, and sometimes it can take a little bit to make sure everyone's on the even playing field. Like there was a part of our development where people were like throwing out all these ideas that were really cool ideas, but they didn't fit within the scope of what we were doing. And so even making sure that your ideas about scope for a project are the same is really important, because I think most people who have tried to make a game understand feature creep and how that can affect your development. And just as far as like tools that are really useful, I use Slack an awful lot. I feel like it's a really good place to talk to people. You can have as many people as you want in a Slack channel. You can send documents, you can send snippets of code, which is really good. I find that it's a really good all-around place. You can send DMs, so if someone wants to talk to you privately, they can talk to you there as well. And it kind of feels a little bit more formal than Twitter, which is kind of nice. It's a good way to kind of separate that, even though we still do a lot of our DMs on Twitter, because people check Twitter more often, as it turns out. People are on Twitter a lot. Google Hangouts is really good, a really good alternative to Skype. It's also good if you do a lot of emailing. With Southern Monsters, for the first 2.5 years of development, we actually only communicated through email and like only recently made a Slack channel. It was pretty silly, actually, because we would have like several hundred emails in a single email and have to start a new email chain. So don't do that, because it's really hard to find stuff when you have like 8 different like email threads. OBS is really useful for communicating what you're working on. You can record what you have on your screen, so you can see like if you're having a bug that you need someone else to fix that they aren't finding, you can record your bug on OBS and like give them a video that shows exactly what's happening. So I've done that to even just show like something I implemented very quickly, instead of like having to have them all re-download the game and everything. They can just watch a video and say, oh, that's a cool new thing you put in. So that's a good little thing I like to do. Skype is also good, and then in person when you can is fantastic for talking about games, because it's just so much quicker. Like when you aren't having to like parse someone's like words, you know, in a DM or whatever, it's a lot faster to just talk face to face. And another thing that is really helpful is just to keep the ball rolling, even when you hit a roadblock or you get really busy. Like I recently moved cross country, and that was like, you know, that kind of took a chunk of my time. But I communicated about that, and we kept the ball rolling. Like once I got moved and settled in, I started posting my progress, and it got people reinvigorated. And I think that's another good thing to keep in mind, is that there will be lulls in development. Like people will get tired, or they will have big things happen in their lives, or they will just need to take a break or work on something else. And that's fine. You just have to keep, you know, look into what your situation is and figure out, you know, how do you keep the ball rolling? Even if it's not working on the game, just like, you know, catching up on Slack or whatever, and just making sure that you're all still in communication. Though, like, if you don't hear from people for like a week, like, that's usually okay. There's been like times in the past where something has happened and like someone didn't talk for like 2 days, and then someone subtweeted them, and it's like, don't do that. Like, just be understanding of like people's time, which is, you know, still goes back to being compassionate with your collaborators. Like, be understanding. And another good thing to do is to ask advice from people who have experience with collaboration or with project management. Like, people are really open to talking. Like, I don't think many people are as scary as we think they are. Someone who helped me immensely in this was Henry Faber. He's a fantastic human being who runs a couple of orgs in Toronto, Gamma Space being one of them. And he gave me a lot of advice and mentorship, especially at the start of this project. He helped me set up a Slack channel. He helped me kind of think about like, oh, I should make a document, you know, like all these things that like weren't immediately apparent to me. And he helped me really set kind of a level of professionality in this project we're working on. So finding a mentor like that was extremely, extremely helpful for me. And if you have someone in your community who does like run a program or run an organization, or if you're part of like a Unity users group or something like that, like there's going to be someone there who has managed people or has worked on a project that you can hopefully approach and ask for some advice if you run into problems in your own projects and collaborations. All right, and I just have a few other things that are kind of, I think, important. And a lot of these I've kind of touched on briefly. The first is starting small and starting simply. If this is the first time you're collaborating in the first project you're making, make it simple. Make a short Twine game, make something, you know, really small, maybe iterate on something that's in like a Unity tutorial. Just find something very small with a group of people you want to work with and see how that goes, see how it feels, and see what you're able to do. Because it's the best way to get a feel for a project. Before jumping into something that's going to take a year or more to make something that takes a month. And I've found that doing that has been just like so important to everything we've done, pretty much. Just starting really small, really simply, tell a good story, do something important with that short work, and you're gonna learn so much more from that than you will just trying to go headfirst into a really big project. Celebrate the small successes. The first, you know, time you implement something successfully, like talk about it. Like when your collaborator has their first draft done, celebrate it. Like, everything that someone does is like so important to development. So anytime any of your collaborators do something, you should be celebrating it. It's amazing that any game ever gets made, and I know like pretty much everyone says that, but it's just so true. So the fact that anyone gets any work done on any game is incredible. Be honest with yourself and your collaborators. This whole time I've kind of been touching on that. Trust yourself, trust your intuition. Don't be precious about your work is another thing that's really hard to learn. Be open to critiques, be open to critiquing others. Just be honest. Honesty is just so important when it comes to collaborating. I can't stress that enough. And it's good every once in a while to get feedback from people who aren't on the project. Have a friend who isn't involved play, what you have. Set up a little demo. Give them a chance to look at it and see what they think. And try to find people who will be very honest with you. That's also really good. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about collaboration and communication. So thank you, and good luck on your projects.
It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level.